Hello everybody, my name is Tessa Williams and I decided to do my diversity field experience on learning about and interviewing two people about anxiety and depression. So before I interviewed the two participants, I had some very few but some prior knowledge about anxiety and depression, and I was aware that some of my friends slash classmates were suffering, and I knew that it affected their lives, but not to how and to the extent and why it affected their lives in the ways it did. And I didn't really learn much about it in school. I took some classes where it was mentioned, but we really never went into full detail about these two mental disorders. And I felt like it would be beneficial to learn more about them and how they really affect everyone's day to day lives. So, the process I did when doing my diversity field experience is I generated the questions that would help me better understand what it was like in their day to day lives, and I had to keep in mind like they would be comfortable answering and what would be appropriate to ask them. And I decided to interview two of my very close friends who don't usually open up about their mental illnesses, and they don't really talk too much about it, but they agreed to let me interview them for my project. And so I generated about 6 questions, and for the interview, we decided to do it in the comfort of their own homes where they felt comfortable talking about what it's like to have these mental disorders. And then I researched anxiety and depression, and then I came up with this PowerPoint, and now I'm recording it. So a couple of examples of the questions I asked is, do you feel as if your anxiety has ever stood in the way of your learning? What are a few things you wish that people better understood about what it's like to deal with anxiety and depression? What methods have they used to overcome the undesirable things that their anxiety and depression has brought about? And do you think school was harder with anxiety through high school or now through college? And do you feel as if you were able to freely talk about your anxiety and depression, or are you more sheltered? And they all both agreed that these questions were appropriate and they agreed to answer them. So just like kind of a overview summary of the responses I got. They were a little more into detail, but this is just kind of a summary. And for the first question, both interviewees said that their anxiety has affected their learning at times, and pretty much said that getting their work done and doing well on tests has caused anxious feelings in the past. And for the second question, the first girl I interviewed wants people to understand that she doesn't choose to have anxiety, and she also wants people to learn how to react in a more appropriate manner. And the second girl I interviewed wants people to understand that it goes in waves, and sometimes she is fine and doing well, and other times it hits hard and brings her sadness. They both said that to help their anxious feelings, they have been prescribed medicines, and they surround themselves with people who make them happy rather than bring them down. And for the next question, the first girl I interviewed said that she felt high school was harder, and she kind of went into detail about saying how, like, high school you had to, it was like very important for people to be popular, and people were way more judgmental. And now that she's in college, she kind of does her own thing, and she feels as if she doesn't have to like impress people as much as she did in high school, which is what caused some of her anxious feelings. And my second friend that I interviewed described that she did not start experiencing her anxiety until she went away for college. And so she never really experienced it in high school, and then coming to college and being away from home has caused some anxiety in her life. And for the last question, my friend said that she can usually talk about it because she's been dealing with it for a longer time, and she thinks like it makes her feel better to talk about it. And a second friend said that she tends to be more sheltered and doesn't like talking about it because it just doesn't make her feel much better. So I now did some research on anxiety, and it's kind of just some basic facts and stats that I found. But anxiety is the most common mental disorder in the United States, which I didn't know before. And the term anxiety disorder refers to specific psychiatric disorders that involves extreme fear or worry and includes generalized anxiety disorder, and panic attacks, agoraphobia, social anxiety, selective mutualism, separation anxiety, and specific phobias. And I was very surprised about this number because that was a very large number, that 44 million Americans suffer from anxiety. But I also found this kind of surprising. Only 1/3 receive treatment. And there's a large spectrum of severity, It is highly treatable. It's just you have to be prescribed or go in and get diagnosed with it, and then doctors usually give medicines in different doses. Depends on the severity of the person's anxiety. And about 18.1% of the population suffers from this, and it can derive from genetics, life experiences, and brain chemistry. So what it means by that is like it can run from in your genes. For life experiences, like my second friend that I interviewed said that she thinks her anxiety has come about since like being away from home and having to like be able to live life like and more independently. And lastly, brain chemistry, just the making of your brain. So I did some research on depression, and it is common medical illness that negatively affects how one feels, thinks, and acts. It can, just like anxiety, it can vary from mild to severe, and it's a feeling of being sad a large amount of the time, and there are obvious symptoms to detect depression. It affects 1 in 5 adults every year, and one in every 15 adults every year, and 1 in every 6 at some point in their lifetime. And it is different than grief because depression is like the symptoms have to be present for 2 weeks is what I found, and it's very easy to detect them. But grief, like for depression, one usually like loses their self-worth and whatnot. In grief, it's just something that comes from a life like event that usually passes in the grief stages. And depression, like anxiety, is also treated with medication. So after going through this experience and interviewing my friends who I haven't talked too much about their anxiety and depression in the past, I learned that a large amount of people suffer from anxiety and depression, a much larger number than I expected. And I learned that from researching how to like appropriately respond to and help people who have these disorders. Like talking to my friends, they said like they wish people asked them how they were doing more frequently and whatnot. And I got a little insight on how not only my friends but what others go through on a day-to-day basis. And I also know that people are affected by different things and in different severities. And I also believe that it should be discussed more in schools, so more so high school, so more people can understand, because there are a lot of people around them that they would not assume are suffering from anxiety and depression, but truly are. So my understanding on these mental disorders has been very heightened, and I am very glad I did it on anxiety and depression. Thank you.